Once again, you're welcome. You're welcome if you're just joining us. You're welcome to the online executive roundtable with the conversation talking about moving from corporate turnaround and recovery to corporate transformation and growth. That is the conversation for this meeting or for this online roundtable. You're welcome, everyone. So I introduced myself as the programs manager for the First Leadership Academy. For some of you, you might be hearing about that for the first time. The First Leadership Academy is the training arm of the TL First Group, a leading global consulting group of transformational leadership, strategy, productivity and improvement, and innovation consultants. The Academy provides over 3 decades of experience offering executive education to build and transform leaders across governments and businesses to improve staff productivity, work processes, and revenue generation. We deliver high impact learning, leadership development, strategy, governance, and change management to enable strong leadership teams, enterprise-driven transformation, and performance improvements, right? And that is why we are starting off, because of this work that we do and interacting with leaders across businesses and governments. We believe that this conversation that we're having today is very, very important, right? We live in an era of disruptions in which powerful global forces are changing how we live and work. The rapid spread of digital technologies, who would have ever thought that at some point people would even give a thought to hold meetings online or to have a roundtable online? You know, there would have been a lot of push, oh, it can't happen, people wouldn't turn out, it wouldn't be interesting to be as engaging. But look at what has happened, you know, digital technologies, the growing challenges to globalization, the great resignation. A lot of companies, just recently in Lagos, I learned that an entire engineering team resigned from work to go sort for other forms of engagement, you know, remote work. So there's the great resignation happening everywhere, not just in the Western world, but here in Nigeria, it is happening, and here in Africa, it is happening as well. So the great resignation and the rapid mutation of the COVID-19 virus. Today, it is the Delta variant, another time it's the Omicron, and the next time it's another variant, and it's getting, you know, stronger and stronger and transforming itself. And then there's the climate change issues. Just here in Nigeria, in Port Harcourt, there's the air is seriously polluted at the moment, and so many forms of climate change issues happening around the world. There's the human rights conversations too going on, and these are all roiling business, the economy and societies. This and other global trends are actually pushing and creating new opportunities, really. As this may look like challenges, but in these challenges, there are great opportunities for companies, for sectors, for countries, and individuals like you and I to embrace them successfully. However, we have noticed from our interactions that a lot of companies, a lot of individuals are still struggling, you know, to meet up with this rapid change that is going on. A lot of people are still within that phase, are still thinking recovery. You know, businesses, corporations are still thinking recovery at this point. And this conversation, we want to spark you as a leader of an organization, as a leader of a business, as a leader of in a government institution, to begin to think radically, And that's why our conversation, moving on from, you know, corporate turnaround and recovery to corporate transformation and growth, is very important and timely at this moment. And we have fantastic facilitators who would be addressing the issues today. We have our GMD and the person of Professor Olu Olasade. He would be speaking on this webinar. And then we also have Mr. Soji Adeni as well on this conversation. And I can't wait to hear the insightful tips that they'll be sharing with you. So I want to hope that you have your writing, your writing materials, your pen, your paper, because it is going to be explosive, really. It's going to be explosive. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Thank you for everyone who is joining in. Thank you for everyone who has joined in so far. Before I introduce our first speaker, I would just want to remind us again about the house rules. Please stay muted. If you need to ask a question or make a comment, you can just click on the reaction tab at the bottom to raise your hand or to applaud or to share any form of reactions. Please, you can use those tabs. If you want to ask a question, drop it in the chat box. We'll be taking them, and during the Q&A session, we'll answer all your questions. And the meeting is held under the Chatham House rules, and this means that you're free to use any of the information that is received, but you cannot use the identity or the affiliation of the speaker or any participants who will be sharing on this meeting or on this call. So we are pleased and we are happy to have every one of us here. So to go into the first conversation, that's moving from recovery to growth, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Olu Olaside. He's a chartered accountant, a turnaround economist, and a visiting professor of transformational leadership from the Kent Business School. And for over 3 decades, he acts as a catalyst for productivity, capacity building, change, and transformational leadership for many organizations across public, private sector, and international governments in the UK, Nigeria, South Africa, Uganda, Ghana, and the United States. And we're pleased and honored to have him in our midst this morning. Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. You're welcome. I can't hear you, sir. I don't know if that's just me or it's everyone on the call.
Yeah, Prof, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, Prof.
It's the wonders of technology. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
That was meant to be much better. Thank you very much. Loretta, it's great to see many of us this morning. I heard when people were putting messages in the chat that some of us have come from different parts of Nigeria, and a couple of people, a few people from UK. I heard someone join from London. I am joining you from London, so it's quite great to be there. I can see my colleague, the big doctor, Adeni. I think you're joining twice. I think with the cap.
I'm excited. I'm excited to be here.
The cap you have
Good
on
to see
your
you,
head,
Prof.
with the cap you have on your head, it's obviously you're joining from Nigeria, because over here, unless it's winter cold, that is causing that. Let me just say a few things. One is, it would be great if you leave your videos on so we can interact. I know a few people left their videos on earlier, but obviously, depending on where you are, you can switch off your video if you feel more comfortable. So that's one. And secondly, it would be great if you wanted to share, it's an interactive conversation. So if you have some thoughts, either you type it in the chat and they will bring it up. We'll talk about it, or so raise your hand, your intellectual hand, digital hand, and then they'll let me know. Or you can just raise the physical hand as well. Let me know. I think they've made it clear that this is run under Chatham House rules. So we keep everything confidential. We hope to stream this broadcast, so it's important to bear that in mind. I think even as I'm talking, we're going to try and link up with the YouTube platform and stream. If there are things that are highly confidential, you think you don't want to say, you can type them as a chat instead, That way it would be streamed online. Right. So I am going to share my screen in a second, and then start the presentation. Just give me a moment. Let me just try and connect and share the screen. Maybe in the meantime, if anyone wants to share their thoughts and their expectation, we could do that while we're waiting for my system to connect. Or maybe Saji can say 1 or 2 words to introduce yourself as well, and keep the conversation going while my computer sets up. I'll let you know when I'm through.
It's exciting to be here. I'm sure that while you're trying to share your screen and get technology running, it's really exciting to have a lot of people joining us from across the world this morning. And I'm assuring you again that it will definitely be worth the time you're about to invest. When you spend time in webinars and knowledge gathering like this, you should consider them as time invested. And of course, for every investment, our goal is to ensure that you have return on investment that is much more than the amount of resources that you put into it. So for those of you in Nigeria, I know how expensive data can be. And so having you invest that kind of resource in this training, I want to assure you that it will definitely be worth your while, and that your return on investment will be over and above whatever it is that's going to cost you to remain connected for 90 minutes. But having said that, I think Prof should be ready in a moment.
I'm back now.
Thank you.
So thanks for that. What's saying, by the way, is these are series of webinars on different topics. Now, for example, we do finance. Last time we did public sector, private participation. So we will be letting you know of future webinars, and we want to keep them in future to 60 minutes, so 1 hour. So your data wouldn't run out too much, but your intellectual database will be significantly higher. I'm going to share a document, and then we'll take it from there. Let me share my screen. Right. Just confirm that you could see the screen or the documents. You happy with that?
Yes, sir. We can see your screen.
Fantastic. Okay, so what we want to talk about primarily is, and like I said earlier on, it's going to be an engaging conversation. I'm just putting on a second screen so I can see your faces and your reactions. For those of you who have your cameras on, that's fantastic. Mr. Jiro, that you have your camera on, and Ben, and a few of you, please feel free, but keep your microphone muted. That is important. So let's start with just the outline, what we're going to go through in the next. This will take just a few minutes, so we can have a discussion and you can contribute. We're going to go through, please remember to keep your microphones muted, just the speakers to have the microphone unmuted. We'll go through, I think there's still a sound that is popping in the background. Okay, it's better now. So we'll go through this process by starting with the look at the disruptions we'll face in recent times. We can have a dialogue about that. Jiro, I think it's your microphone, yeah. And then we'll talk about how corporate recovery has been made. So it doesn't matter whether you are from a corporate private sector or the public sector, recovery is recovery. So the fact that you put value back into your service, the value realized back into your service doesn't mean you don't need to transform or find a way to reinvent yourself as an organization, at the least improve efficiency. Giving examples of how people have moved from the challenges of the past to become an innovator or a leader in their field. We apply the concept of the not domain, so we try and focus your thoughts on your core priorities and the fundamentals for turnaround. We do a little bit on performance management, just a little bit to apply the model, and then we'll talk about how that works in deployment terms. So in recent times, we've had all sorts of shocks. People talked a lot about COVID, but COVID hasn't been the only shock that we've faced in the system. You know that. We've had disruptions around what they call the millennia and the mindset of people who are going into workplaces, the kind of work environment that they prefer to work in, and the kind of industry they prefer to work in. We've had shocks around the oil price war that started just before COVID. It was relaxed a bit during COVID, and then it was picked up again when COVID settled. And all of this has driven price down. It's picking up a little bit, we know that, but the prices are still relatively lower. So budgets in terms of, in the case of Nigeria, for example, economic development is less, even though you hear a lot of trillions flowing about, but we know that the translation into real cash is not the same. Inflation is picking up across Europe and the Americas. The cost of living is rising. There's not enough funds to support that growth. Supply chain has been disrupted in many ways, we know that. And then you still have the need for globalization. Now that some of these disruptions actually are opportunities. So we shouldn't assume that everything that happened is pushing corporate organization, corporate development growth down. Some of them indeed are positive. So we need to bear that in mind. So how do we see a movement from back into the from back into a state of not just recovery, but a state of growth? Many of you remember Toyota, for example, many decades ago, when they decided that at that point the taste for Asian cars wasn't that great. So the taste was, I'm talking about the 80s now. Some of you have been around since then or before then, and the analysts, the 70s, 80s, the taste was for European cars and for American cars all around the world. The Japanese market was just trying to pick it. Honda, Nissan, Toyota. Toyota obviously was slightly leading the pack, but it wasn't sufficiently big. And then you had all the challenges around recalls and faults. And then it decided at that point, rather than fail, or rather than just try to bounce back, to do two things. One, to build a resilience model, which is something that we should be doing as an organization. I said to, many years back, I said to a group of people in the oil industry, I said, oh, we need to build resilience into our systems. And they were like, what do we need that for? Everything is fine. Nobody thought about COVID then. The market is booming, oil prices are booming, getting up to the roof. And then suddenly, a few months later, that chief executive summit, we had what was called the black cloud. I don't know whether some of you remember, ash cloud, when some 15 years ago, we just had all over the world this ash from some volcanic eruption somewhere that just made it impossible for planes to fly. That was the first time in recent time that planes have been grounded for a long time. That was the first time in recent times. And it's quite interesting that it was as if people never thought things like that could happen. And obviously we know that the markets lost about 20%. We've had other issues, the housing crisis that lost 25%. And then recently, obviously we had the COVID. So one of the things Toyota did was to not only build resilience into the infrastructure and so program, but also to take on world domination, if I can use that word. So how do you take on world domination? At that point, they had a 30-year program. We are going to, so they looked at the best in the industry, and I want to encourage you to do this. They looked at one of the best in the industry, which was or the biggest, which was General Motors in the US. And General Motors was so big, nobody could move there. Then they made almost all the cars, and they were taking over all the cars. And they said, we are going to take on General Motors. You know, so it's a bit like, I don't know what the size of your organization is. If you are, say, in the mid-range in your industry, is like you saying, I'm going to take the top organization. We're going to be better than them. We're going to be bigger than them. So it wasn't just we're going to survive, but we're going to be bigger. So that ideology needs to start coming to people's mind. If you are already big and you are, say, a leader in your industry, wherever you are, you could say, okay, let's say you're big in Nigeria. You could say, I'm going to be bigger than the one in the UK. You know, people say, how is that going to be possible? You know, this is UK, this is Nigeria. I'm going to be bigger than the one in the US. That was what Toyota did. They tackled the biggest manufacturer. That, don't forget that the US also has the biggest market. So not only are they big and the giant and the company is big, they have the ready market, but they decided to take them on. When Pepsi decided to take on Coca-Cola, everybody thought Pepsi was just a small, I mean, again, some of you may remember, may not remember, we're just a very small beverage company, and nobody really liked Pepsi. Some of you may not know that. Some of you in your 30s and in your 40s may not remember that in those days, I don't know how many of you are in your 50s or 60s here, and you remember in those days. By the way, you can react by pressing thumbs up or agree or disagree or make a comment. So like I said at the beginning, you have your reaction button at the bottom of the screen. So you don't have to say things, but you can react and confirm or disagree with some of what I'm saying. And then we can explore your thoughts. So nobody will move near Pepsi. Pepsi was like second class. And Pepsi decided we will take on Coca-Cola. Same way when China 50 years ago said we will take on the United States. At that time, the Chinese economy was where? Nowhere. So it's possible for you to learn from these examples and decide, okay, I know what I do best, and I'm going to take on the giants in the industry. You know, Apple had challenges again around innovation when not only because Steve Jobs had left them, but because the ideas, they were just like an ordinary mediocre. They didn't want to take on the ideas around innovation, around what was futuristic. That was why Steve Jobs left. He was the chief executive. He was the top man there. And then 10 years later, I said, this is the thing. 10 years, well, it's actually theoretically, they realized that actually we missed something here, and they brought him back. Now, it's possible actually for you, wherever you are as a private sector, public sector organization, to have missed an opportunity, but you can still recover if you just look at, okay, what am I really good at? What can I do? You know, and when I say what can I do, it's not about what you can do in terms of product, is what you have in terms of competence. So think about that when you want to grow and transform. When the company called Caterpillar that makes simply vehicles, huge trucks, decided I'm going to launch into the market and start making shoes. And some of you may know this and may not know this. Caterpillar makes branded shoes called CAT. They use the concept and their innovation to launch into a new market. When Nokia, before Nokia became big, Nokia was just a tree company in Finland. They felled trees. So it's actually possible to move out of your zone and innovate into something quite great. You know, many of us, I'm sure many of us know now, but when Uber became a giant, and they still are, to be fair, all over the world, we've got many competitors now who are following their ideas. You know, there's Bolt and there's all around the world, the many, I can't name them. You know, Uber is just a technology company, not a taxi company. It's a logistic company. Amazon is not a fast-moving goods organization. Amazon is a logistic company. So you can grow in markets that you never imagined before if you know how to think deeper than you've done before and how to manage that. So there are many examples, and what I want us to explore is, first of all, if you are still at the state of recovery, and I'm just giving you the slides as a way to start the conversation. I'll let my colleague, Mr. Soji Adeni, just facilitate some of this conversation so we can open up our mics and start talking. But let me just give you some interesting thoughts to start with. So we look at these principles of that turns a company around, and while it turns the company around, accelerate the companies forward. I mean, there are many things we could do in this, and some of you economists will know how it's been done in the past. So this is not necessarily in an order, although we've got the arrows there suggesting that you look at the principles and the methodology, performance. We will look at root cause first before we look at the scorecards and how you apply this. And these principles can be applied in many different environments. So you may not even be at the point of turnaround. You may just be improving your productivity and performance and outcomes. So you can actually learn from some of these pointers and maybe use the matrices and the scorecard approach, or maybe just use the root cause to identify a problem, or maybe just, or like I said, you turn around, or you may be developing your strategic plan for 2022. You should have done that by now, but you're still reviewing it. You're trying to reset your strategies. Then you can look at strategic alignment. So those are some of the thoughts I'll leave with you today. Kumudu, I hope I pronounced his name right. If I didn't, he doesn't know anyway, because he's not here to hear me pronounce his name. He said, in a world of unprecedented disruptions, and we know, and I said this before, that we've had this level of disruptions. And let me be honest with you, every time if you go back in history, to go back to records began thousands and thousands of years ago, every time they face a level of disruption or shock to the system, they go unprecedented. Listen, we will continue to face unprecedented disruptions. So when the world manages, when the world, thank you, Daniel, and so yes, I saw your comments there. When the world manages to get out of this one, and we go back into cruise control, someone else will come. I don't know why they come. So maybe we need to pray more, or maybe we just need to understand that we need to learn to be victorious over every challenge that comes our way. So it says transformation revolves around the need to create new value. And I see some of you have made comments about that quote already. New values. So look at the examples I gave you. New values to unlock opportunities. So where are your core competencies and where are you looking at? So, I mean, I know, I don't know the organizations you're all from, I can see your names, but so I can't give examples unless maybe when we start the discussion, you can give some examples of some of this. So new values to unlock new opportunities and drive growth. So your growth comes in something new. And you know, one of my quotes, my staff they've used Kumudu's quotes. They didn't use my quotes, so I feel a little bit jealous now. My staff who produced these slides for me. So I would have loved to see my quotes, but I'm just kidding. But one of my quotes is, if you think outside the box, you're still thinking relative to the box. Think about that. Everybody says outside the box. So when you go and have your corporate or management brainstorming exercise, what we call a catchball here is a new methodology used. It's a US methodology. It's used all over the world in strategy. It's a catchball. So you throw the ball up and you catch it. You know the game, catch it and you say something. Throw the ball, catch it, say something and all that. So when you go and have your catchball sessions, your strategy sessions, and they say, let's think about something new, something disruptive. Most of your ideas tend to come relative to where you were before. So it's usually unseen for a tree farming company to the guy, the chief exec or the strategy manager or the production manager to catch the ball and say, I'm going to start producing phones. Or if you were a Caterpillar company or a truck company, to say, I'm going to start producing designer shoes. They say, first how, so, but that's what it means to innovate. That's what it means to unlock new opportunities, creating new value. So I ran an exercise with a group of chief executives. This was in Lagos, actually, a chief executive program in Lagos. And I said to all the chief executives we went into groups and said, let's innovate something. And so they said, okay, so I won't name the companies, but I'll give you some ideas. You may know some of these companies. They're all multinational PLCs. So one said, I'm trying to paraphrase because they're not here. So I don't want you to be able to know what they're planning, because when they implement these things, they're still commercially confidential. So one said, so we'll open more sites somewhere. And the other one said, everything they were saying was based on what they were doing, and they want to do more. So I said, so they said, yeah, we are thinking outside the box, something new. I said, everything you said is still relative to what you were doing. Can you not think about something that you haven't done before that is impossible? So we ran this exercise, and I said, I can't run it here because obviously this is a discussion and not a workshop as it were. I said, think about something impossible. So something impossible to do, and something bizarre and impossible, something that people will say, this is crazy, this is impossible. Do you know it's difficult for people to think about something? Everything they said was still possible until somebody said, we move our headquarters to the moon. I said, aha. I said, but that's impossible, but maybe not possible within the sort of the years that we are here, because we know that moon is still, we don't know how livable the moon is at the moment. So when they said we'll move our headquarters to the moon, so I said, so let's hold on. Somebody needs to mute the microphone. I said, let's hold on to that thought. Now we're talking. So you run an operation, a PLC, a multinational in Nigeria, Ghana, and they run it in, they have, say Dangote. It wasn't Dangote, by the way, but another company. So when they said move headquarters to the moon, and I said to them, so why do you want to do that? They said, so we can be more visible. And everybody will look up and will see our headquarters. And then we can easily move from the moon to Asia, to our office in Asia. So you now see how it's becoming a reality. So we now thought, how can we develop an agile structure that will allow you to run operations all over the world and do whatever you wanted to do. So I'm just giving you that example. I won't dwell on it too much, on how you can start from the impossible and make things possible. I mean, maybe we'll run another session one day on innovation, Loretta. I think that's a good topic for the future, but not for today. So that's effectively what Kumudu was saying, and what we should be adopting. So the first thing I want to, so you need to have a clear view of where you are and where you want to go. The thing about compass is when you ask anyone, and this happens a lot, and I mean a lot of Nigerians and a lot of people all over the world answer the same way. When you say where is north, they say north is there. I mean, so if you're Muslim, then and you pray well and you know your daily prayers, then you should, after praying for so many in a certain location, maybe at the office, break room, or in your house, you should know relatively where east is. And I know many of us use the mark and map and whatever. I'm not Muslim, but I know many of us pray and are Muslims. So when you know where the east is, it's easier to know 90 degrees from east where north is. However, most of the time, people actually don't know sense of direction because it depends on where you're facing. And your north is not necessarily what is in front of you. And that's what this is saying. Your north is not necessarily what is in front of you. So you need to realign yourself and find where your north is, where your competencies lie as a way to turn yourself around. You work around your vision, obviously, and your mission and your core values. Now, vision is what you see. That's one of my quotes, and where you see your organizations becoming in the future. It's not how you get there. It's just where you want to be. And vision shouldn't be too specific. When you set your vision, you don't crystallize it in a way that it restricts you. That's why it's called a vision. Mission is how you pursue that and how you go towards delivering that where you are. So your vision is not to produce, and some companies would say my vision is to produce 5 billion barrels of oil. No, that can't be your vision. It has to be something beyond that, something not just the output, but the outcomes and the effect of the outcomes and the expressions, and that. So you need to look at that. And that, if you have your vision well defined, it allows you to open up the way you get to the point of your vision. And obviously your core values are important. So I'm going to sort of quickly run through this slide so I can round up and we can ask questions. So when one of the principles you need to be aware of, and I used it to end this, is you can say that you're trying to move away from as much as possible uncertainty. So you're trying to minimize your risk. It doesn't mean that there wouldn't be uncertainty. You need to manage around it. You know about the Donald Rumsfeld, God bless him, that passed on now, about this phrase about unknown unknowns and how you need to mitigate even the risk you do not know exist. So first thing is, let's minimize these disruptions as much as possible, minimize shocks in our system, and then promote efficiency. In promoting efficiency, that's when people do re-engineering, reorganization, and then begin to mobilize change, so towards your priorities. I said here, you don't move, that's again one of my quotes, you don't move from tailwind, you move from tailwind to horsepower. So what it means is, you see, many companies didn't know, and many organizations, even many countries, didn't know how weak they were until they faced the last disruption. So when you fly, and everybody, most people fly up and down, regional flight, international flight. When you fly, you notice that you get there faster when you have tailwind. I don't know whether some of you are into aviation. I used to consult for aviation as well, by the way. So when you're there, when the wind is pushing, you don't use as much fuel and you get there faster. So it feels as if you are efficient. So because you have tailwind, sometimes obviously tailwind causes turbulence, you know that. because if the wind is too much, it's pushing the plane in a different direction. But usually when the plane has tailwind, you use less horsepower. So you just push, it pushes you on. I don't know what happens with cars, but I've never seen that with cars, but I know it happens with planes. So when companies are propelled by tailwind, they feel efficient. Everything is okay. The business is coming in, the money is coming in, all revenue is coming in, you're moving on. So you don't think about efficiency, productivity. But you now need to make sure, regardless of the economic environment, you are running with horsepower. So the productivity comes on top of that. So you can assess exactly which level you are in terms of your operations. So many people didn't know how weak they were until COVID came, and then they started to suffer. Yet, even in this COVID, many organizations continue to thrive. In fact, some even increased and improved. You know, this online meetings is not new. Zoom meetings is not new. Microsoft Teams is not new. Go to meetings and many other softwares have been around for years. We've done online meetings like as far back as 15 years ago when we were fighting for millennium, what's that? Bug. There's a bug that they said about in 2000, millennium bug. I don't know whether many of you remember that. Some of you were very young then. Y2K, you must have read about it. You must have read about it. So I remember that Y2K. I was a finance director in 1999/2000, and everybody was worried. Year 2000 is coming. They said the world is going to, in fact, some people thought the world was going to end. They said, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. Just stay. Actually, to be fair, I didn't believe the world was going to end because I was director of finance and IT. I didn't believe, that was 15 years ago, Ben was saying, I didn't believe that all planes would crash, because they said the planes would crash in the middle of the air. But even though I didn't believe, I also didn't fly that night, because even though I knew it wasn't going to happen, yet I didn't want to be the one that would test it whether it would happen, even though we had systems and structures in place. So everybody stays. And I remember that night. Usually, you know, you're with your family, you do everything for watch night, Happy New Year. But that particular Y2K, most people stayed at home, because we didn't want to be driving on the way from church and you get stuck on the way back. Most people joined the thing online. So I'd done my work as the director of finance and IT for my organization and the government that I was working for in the UK. I made sure the things were resilient, and we just went back home. The prayer, watch night prayer was short. I don't know how many of you remember this. Well, maybe it wasn't short in Nigeria, but suddenly in the UK, it was very short, because everybody wanted to open their eyes quickly to see whether things were dropping off the sky, because they said the things were dropping off. And then we realized, so after we survived that, people now started saying, why do we fly up and down anyway? We should be having online interactions. So they started introducing online meetings, go to meetings and all of that. So when COVID came, some companies were for them, it was business as usual. So while we were struggling and trying to meet online and all that, it was business as usual. So that's what I'm saying, that look at your organization, look at your resilience, your power. But when you're trying to clean up the old mess, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You know the expression. So there's some good things in every organization. So we need to understand the difference and know which one we cascade in and we're getting rid of, and which one we building upon. So the principle is to accept what is good, challenge what is bad, and replace what needs to be replaced. Okay, what time is it? I think I'm gonna let me just run through some of these things and then I'll hand over. So what I said was you need to do a root cause analysis of your problems, understand what is there, and see how you can improve that. And there are many ways to do that. You start with your Pareto to 80-20 rules. Everybody knows about Paretos, and see where your drivers are. What are the key, the Pareto always work. What are the key things driving your output and productivity, and what do you need to focus on? I just saw just laughing there. Maybe he was planning to talk about this. So I'll let you, so I mean, the tools you can use for your, I'll run through them so you can come back to them if you want. The tools you can use for analysis, everybody knows about the fishbone, and you can do your 6 M's, 4 P's, 5 Y's, and all the other process tools. We can talk about this in more detail if you want. If some of you want, you can talk to me, or you can talk to my colleagues in the office. So you combine your Paretos to understand where the problem is and what are the highest contributor to the problems. And then, you know, the key is to adopt this model. This model is new. It's a US model, and it's called an inch wide, mile deep. So usually when people want to solve a problem, you start digging and digging everywhere. Let me see whether you can even see my mouse. Yeah, you can see my mouse. Digging and digging everywhere. See the guy there? He's digging everywhere. He's not getting to the problem. He's not getting to the gold. But what if you just go inch wide and a mile deep? You get to the course and to where your 80% is quicker, or your 20% that runs to 80%. So it's a concept of focus, inch wide and mile deep, versus a mile wide and an inch deep. So again, I can teach you about that at some point, and we can discuss that at a different session. Clear your expectation, solve your problem, and just move on coaching. I said here that you have a good scorecard, a good principle of performance management that drills back to what we called your A3 performance analysis approach. A3 is when you look at every problem is solved on one piece of paper. That's another course, and link that with the performance management framework and the true north that I've been talking about today. There's still many more things to talk about. So I think I'll just stop and just maybe let's have some interaction. Maybe I'll leave it here, and then I'll let so you just do the next 15-20 minutes before we round up. So you can, if you want to make some comments or ask a question, please unmute your mic. Let us know, and then you unmute your microphone, and then you can ask your question. Hope that's a good summary.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Yes, thank you very much, sir, for the very insightful conversation. In the chat box, we're surprised that, you know, online meetings had started 15 years ago, but it was the pandemic that made us jump on it desperately. And some people are, okay, someone was saying that he had to leave for a meeting. So at this point, any questions? Do you have any questions? I'm seeing the comments, apt and awesome session, fantastic presentation. Well done, sir. Thank you very, very much, sir. One thing that I took away from, or I took away several things. Sir, when you mentioned, you said many companies didn't know how weak they were until COVID-19 happened. So it means that most times we just feel that we're on the cruise and we're not constantly checking to see how well we're doing, if there are any leaks. So I think this is important to business owners, to corporations, that you should constantly do that stress test, that constant look at your organization. How are you doing? And that is something that our organization does, help companies and businesses to look out for those holes that might sink their ships. It's not just comfortable sail, there's a leak and just take out the water. Why not block that source before something even bigger happens? And you gave us an action point that I would like to share with everybody before welcoming. I've not seen any questions yet or any hands up. So I wouldn't delay before going to the next session, but you gave us an action point, and that is that we should try to figure out what we are good at, and that's beyond the products that we are currently offering. So if you're in the bank, the finance institution, wherever you are, I want to encourage us to really look at and reconsider what are we good at. Because it's when you look at Caterpillar, it doesn't make sense for them to move from big engines to machines to making shoes, right? It doesn't make sense from a paper company to a phone company. It did its called on a radical form of thinking that answered the question of what are we good at? So what are we good at in the area of competence? So I want to encourage every one of us to take up this assignment when you go back to your teams and you're having strategy sessions. Please do that. Okay, Mr. Zion Obetan said, indeed, there is good in every organization. Don't throw the baby with the bath water. So I'll move on immediately to the next session. I know that we have a very, very busy schedule, even our facilitators as well. So I'll, at this point, introduce Mr. Olusoji Adeni. He's a development and monitoring and evaluation professional who has worked in several countries across 3 continents, managing complex operations. He has over 28 years of industry experience in the private and public sector, as well as a career spanning over 21 years with the United Nations. He is a PhD candidate in development economics at the University of East London, UK, and we are privileged and blessed to have him on the session today. So, sir, we can't wait for you to continue the conversation, this very, very intriguing conversation. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Loretha. Wow, thank you so much, Professor Lasade. When you listen to Prof and you are trying to step down to listen to someone who is one of his mentees, it can be a very, very daunting task. But I assure you that I will try my best to at least maintain the momentum and give you food for thought that will show definitely that I have learned quite a lot hanging around Prof for this number of years. I like to bring home some of the concepts that Prof threw at us with the bottom line of achieving transformation in most of our circumstances that we find ourselves, especially in industries and systems. The easy one, which everyone often are able to allude to, the commercial sector. Prof talked about Toyota, talked about Coca-Cola and Pepsi and Uber, Airbnb, and the rest of them. We saw those shifts in transformation based on the outlook that each and every one of these organizations approached. The challenge is that technically all over the world, we've had instances where organizations have actually had very, very good strategic plans, very, very good key strategic objectives that are supposed to drive the plans. And then somehow, in the midst of all of this, they are still largely unable to deliver the results that they plan to achieve. So what accounts for the difference between the plan and the implementation? In fact, back home in Nigeria, there is a very popular saying that we do not lack the right policies. We do not lack the right strategies, but where we fail is indeed in the area of implementation. So I'd like to start my presentation by looking at why do we have misalignment in strategic positioning that often leads to disconnect in implementation. And let's look at even the public sector. I don't know if I am able to share my screen now. Okay, please, can you enable?
I think you should be able to. You are.
No, it's saying host disable participant screen sharing. So
okay,
let's try to add, maybe you'll just, make it possible.
Your co-host now, your co-host.
Yeah,
now.
okay, good. So it should share. Okay. Thank you. I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So basically, there was an Harvard Business School study that shows that more than 90% of companies that made an attempt to have good strategic plans actually failed at achieving the results or the targets that they have. That in fact, less than 10% of them actually achieved those objectives, and that made them to start thinking. And I'll take you back to what Prof just showed us about the root cause analysis. Since he already said so much about that, I won't go into how to move in that direction. But let's ask that same question. Why is there such a persistent gap between ambition and performance? Why is there a disconnect between strategy formulation and strategy execution? And that would be some of the issues that we will raise. The first one that I'd like to look at is the strategic pillars and the issue of misalignment. If you look at these 4 pillars on your screen, you would see that pillar 2 is leaning on pillar 3. Pillar 2 leaning on pillar 3 means that pillar 2 is completely disconnected from the top. All 3 of them are probably on the foundation of the vision, but because pillar 2 is leaning on pillar 3 and therefore not carrying the load up there, then the chances are that the roof structure will have no basis on pillar 2 to rest effectively. And what does that mean in organizational terms? For each of the pillars, there are strategic goals that are attached to it that are expected to be achieved. Majority of us in Nigeria remembered the recent collapse of the 21-story building in Ikoyi, Lagos, Nigeria. And for those of you who saw the videos, you would see that it collapsed like a pack of cards. In fact, it collapsed in what you would say a sandwich model. You start asking yourself, between each floor is supposed to be a pillar, and each of the pillars are supposed to carry certain amount of weight. Now, I can say without listening to the report of the incident analysis from that site, that the key challenge that will have caused the collapse of that building is that 1 or 2 of the pillars misaligned and therefore lost the capacity to carry the load. And of course, the result is the loss of the lives of the people on that site and the kind of crashing that that building happened to result to. And if you ask me, each and every one of us knows very well that even in regular designs, we see these all the time, building collapse, and we wonder what happened. Exactly the same thing. And it happens also in corporate organizations. Once there is a misalignment in the strategic pillars that are supposed to achieve the foundation of the organization towards achieving its core objectives or its ambitious vision, there would most likely be a problem. So that's where alignment comes in. If you look at this screen, the picture on your screen, you would see various connections that are expected to interconnect and interlink, whether it is communication in the organization, whether it is the effort of the management to identify talent, whether it is the ability of the team to work together in coherence and teamwork. All this needs to connect in such a way that there is no misalignment leading to disconnects that may not allow the organization to achieve its core objective or its goal. So no matter how old your organization or how young your organization is, you need to constantly check for these misalignments and ensure that before they become a crashing source, because weights are not evenly distributed across the key channels that you have, you need to quickly make adjustments. And then, of course, let me talk quickly about some of the strategic pillars that would make or mar the progress of any organization. The first is the vision, and Prof has said so much about it, so I won't go back into it. It is what you see. In fact, I always say that the future belongs to those with the ability to see it first. When we were talking about the challenge of online meetings and how long it's been in progress, I remember very well as a young person in the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, we had this brainstorming session about the future of work. And it grew over time for us to begin to think about how are people going to likely work in the future. And it became one of our standing items on management meeting to see how we can prepare for the future of work. And online meetings, remote working, and all of these options were thrown into the table. And trust me, the same way we would have imagined how people would think about how would you work from home? Who is going to supervise you? How would you work from home? How are you going to connect? Because at that time, there was no Wi-Fi. There was nothing, related to the kind of facilities that we have today that could make anyone think, oh, artificial intelligence can come in. It didn't happen. It wasn't there. This was the late 90s and the early 2000s. And as Prof was saying about the binary challenge on the night of year 1999 to year 2000, each and every one of us was in panic, just like you were saying. I did remember that we refused to, in fact, we had to have a standby generator over the night so that we are not running on power from NEPA on the crossover night, just in case anything happens to our database and our servers. So Prof is absolutely right. It wasn't only in the spiritual realm, even in the offices, there was a lot of panic, and United Nations was not exempted at that time. But bottom line is that the future of work for the United Nations was already something that we considered very important back in the early 2000s. And we began to look at how people are going to work in the event of disruptions. And for us, it wasn't about global pandemic. It was more about the areas in which we operate. I had worked in like 5 different countries in 3 continents. And most of my deployments were into unstable environments. They were into countries that were either recovering from war in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, or they were recovering from tsunami and other nature-induced disasters in Myanmar and Indonesia. So you can see that the future of work for us at that time as an ambitious target to ensure that we can withstand what happened was not because of the pandemic. But of course, once you address a particular issue, it's of course connects with the future for you. The second thing is for you to be able to continuously analyze your position. And Prof has used the right word. You have to check and change, and modify as the case may be. And then of course, you talk about planning and replanning in order to ensure that your targets are still aligned with your vision. So for each of these one, you will see that each pillar is important and it's strategic and it is time-bound for you to be able to be on the path that you want to be. So whether you're looking at the vision or you're looking at the periodic review of your existing goals to ensure that they fit the operational environment and that you stay connected with your vision. That is extremely important. And then of course, you have to keep looking at your target and keep shifting the goal, because your success of today is just the beginning of a bigger challenge that is likely to come tomorrow. So except you keep a SMART objective, and most of us are familiar with this, the specificity, measurability, achievability, and the realistic nature and time-bound of ensuring that our goals are designed in such a way that they give us the results that we want to have. And of course, the last one, which is the planning, is key to achieving results. I won't want to bore you with the issue of core reinforcement and growth investment, but let me just give you an insight into what this means for an organization. As at the time that we were thinking about the future of work, a lot of questions were being asked about how we're going to make that happen. This was the time that everyone had the desktops. Laptops were luxury at that time. So when you talk about the future of work and you're thinking that people are going to work remotely, don't forget that Apple smartphones were not in existence at that time. And we were still thinking, how can we ensure that people invest in the future in such a way that when those remote working opportunities come to play, there will be no resistance. And of course, it became very expensive. We had to invest in more laptops, especially for program officers, desktops for people that were office-based, like account section, supply chain, and the rest of them. And we keep reinforcing our core, which was humanitarian response, being the first to respond, being the ability to save lives, and we didn't take our eyes off the ball, even within that concept. So that is one key area in strategic commitment, that despite the amount of investment that you want to do in growth, don't forget that you must connect it with your vision in such a way that you don't lose your core in the dilution that you get. And of course, all this time, there must be the mindset of a paradigm shift, because business cannot be business as usual when you are looking at transformation. Transformation means you want to work differently from how you used to work. And I was so glad that almost 10 years or 12 years later, when the pandemic eventually happened, it was a seamless operation. Several times the UN had operated remotely. And so for almost the whole of 2020, precisely between March and November of 2020, not a single staff were working from any office locations. Remote work was what was going on all through this period. So how do you develop breakthrough objectives that gives you this type of flexibility? Number one, you need to understand that it might completely change the way you work. It might completely change your budget. It might completely change your mindset. Like Prof said, you have to start thinking not just out of the box, not even relative to the box, but completely outside of everything, such that by the time those aha moments comes, you know that you are getting closer to your target. The second thing is that every organization needs to have sufficient flexibility and tolerance for failure. You cannot have breakthrough objectives when you are so protective of your staff failing. It's once your staff are afraid of failure, they will be so limited to being transformational. You would limit their thinking capacity. You would limit their ability to express their opinion on things that can give you the future. For instance, one of the things I kept saying in some of the meetings was that, why do we think anyone would want to work for the UN in the future? If we don't make flexibility available in the future such that experienced people around the world see it as attractive to come in there, not just for the money, but because they want to contribute and because the system is flexible enough to allow them to work remotely. I work remotely for organizations across several continents, and I sit in my office in Abuja, and it doesn't change, the way I work. I give them their time, I connect with them virtually, and if there is need for physical meetings, we make it happen. So flexibility is important. Remember the story of the Post-it notes. The company was producing glues that were supposed to be permanent glues. In one of the batches produced, the glue refused to stick permanently. And the staff were curious about why will that happen? And they began to attach it to a piece of paper to see how long it stays and all of that. And in the experience of that, the idea of temporary sticking, like Post-it notes, came to life. In fact, eventually that company came to be known for producing Post-it notes more than for the glue company that it was originally meant to achieve. Flexibility, tolerance for failure, allowing staff to experiment is what resulted in that. Then any transformational organization must be open to opportunities. Some of us have read the story of how Google approached Yahoo to build their search engine and sell off the Google technology, and Yahoo didn't think it was the next best thing for them. Today, Google is 10 times the size of Yahoo. What would have happened if Yahoo had taken that opportunity, which was in line with their own strategic objectives, but failure of management to take the right decision? So the breakthrough ideas, not necessarily generated by your existing staff. Opportunities can come even from your competitors. You must stay alert to what you want to do. If you're not looking out for change and for transformation that could come even by alignment or by association, you are not likely to be a breakthrough organization. And then, of course, you cannot do business as usual if you are focusing on being a transformational organization. Business as usual is long dead. Exceptional and opportunistic operations is what will define the future. And then, of course, we must ensure that we cascade our strategic planning down from top to bottom. In fact, we need to make sure that not just the people in the boardrooms know what we want to do, but we must transmit it in such a way that is clear for people that are down the ladder. Let me look at how this plays out even in the current system. First we need to ask, what can we do, or what are we doing at the moment? What can we do differently? And how can we know that we are achieving our key objective? What the Harvard Business School calls the S-curve, which is an organization in its first phase has just evolved and we are celebrating them. And then they are making every effort to improve, and that's the upper part of the curve in phase 2. But they soon get to a point where they are mature. Now, organizations that are transforming and that are transformative in nature do not sleep in phase 2. In fact, they continue to work very hard in their phase 3 as if they are in phase 1. And more often than not, that's why you see Apple will already be announcing Apple 14 when the current one that you are having is Apple 12. The reason is because they want to be their own competitor. They want to be in the market before competition finds a better space. And so they keep reinventing the future, even with the same product, until they get to that aha moment. And let me leave you lastly with what they call the ocean cannery process, or the cash ball process that Prof mentioned in that last presentation, which is just a cycle of activities that drives you from vision all the way down to strategic achievements. Of course, it's not enough for you to develop breakthrough objectives. You must create annual objectives from your breakthrough objectives, and then you must begin to deploy that. That is the fact that you need to not just create these or spend time or moments working on all of this, but being able to know that this is the path that you want to be. For instance, when I became the chairperson of the Global Staff Pensions Fund of the United Nations globally, the first thing that occurred to me was that, why is the organization so slow? As at the time I became chairperson, the organization was already 40 years old. So a lot of things were set and cast in stone for them. So the first thing was that they were very reluctant to change. And again, of course, it was full of a lot of pensioners. So as far as I'm concerned, the key and the most important thing for them was to protect the funds. And there was no way they were going to change the mindset about the possibility of expanding the scope within the organization. But the truth was that the real goal that I had in mind and my own breakthrough objective was to double that fund as quickly as I can, because I was expecting that the world that we were in was going to be much more turbulent, and that the kind of approach that the people that had run it for 40 years were going through with was not going to take us to El Dorado. And I immediately talked about a strategic expansion within the concept of the same control, command and control. The first thing was that I insisted that everyone who was going to manage that has to be part of the system. So that way you are managing what your own future is going to be like. It's not like you're handing it over to some external fund managers whose only interest are in the commissions that they make when they make the investment. The second thing was that I was an African, so I didn't understand why, for instance, with the kind of investment opportunities that were possible in Africa, how come that investment will only be in Asia and North America, and almost no presence at all in the South? And I was wondering what was going on. And they told me, oh no, we have investment in South Africa. And then when we checked what they had in South Africa, it was just one micro investment. So I set very clear breakthrough objectives that we're going to expand our operations. Of course, I didn't first bring them to Nigeria. We went to Nairobi, we went to South Africa, Botswana, and the rest of them. And over time, they got comfortable coming to Africa, realizing that our return on investment in this continent is still about the best in the world. In fact, we had overtaken at that time investments in the North America itself, and and Asia, which were still in single digits. So the investment came, and by the time I was leaving office, I met a total portfolio of about $32 billion US. When I was leaving office, that transformation had given us a $55 billion fund. I was excited because this kept going on even after I had left. I left in 2015. And when I checked in 2019, they had gone from 55 billion that I left behind to 70 billion US dollars. It means that whatever was the cycle that I'm showing you now and the key review process and the PDCA method that was introduced kept working. So in conclusion, transformation cannot happen, in isolation. It requires alignment of strategic objectives. It requires strong analysis of operational environment to make sure that you are still operating at your best speed. And of course, it requires you having ambitious targets. My target was for us to have at least investment in 3 or 4 African countries. We eventually achieved 7 African countries before I left. And as of today, they have 11. But 11 is still small. If you ask me, in a continent that has opportunity for over 50 countries and investment in each and every one of them, because we have staff everywhere in the world. So organizations must keep reinventing itself. That's why I believe that the future of work is working without going to work. And that already happened during the pandemic. Even though the world is saying, let's go back to work. Of course, let's go back to work because we are still thinking within the concept of saying if people are not at work, then the logistics of providing real estate, office accommodation, people that are working in offices as cleaners and the rest of them are our challenge. But the real challenge is that we are going to have automation, we are going to have artificial intelligence that will take over all of those roles while we are still at it. So it's not anything that is the end of it in itself, it is a continuum. And the more we think outside of our mind, the best for the rest of us. Thank you very much, and I hope you did enjoy this short presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saji. Your session was awesome. Even in the chat box, we are seeing, wows and apps, comments like wow, apps, great example that you used in your session. Thank you very, very much for your session. And you really built on well from where Prof started off. And would like to ask a few questions. If you have any questions, please, you can drop them now. I would read out a question that was shared in the chat box when your session was going on. And that is, how do you challenge what is bad when you're not in the decision-making management? So I think that would be for Prof. You talked about your quote where you said the things that are bad, you should take them out, things that are good, so someone is asking that, how do you, challenge bad things or bad things that are going on in your organization when you're not within the decision-making rank yet? So how do you do that?
Well, it's a couple of things. One of the work we do with leaders is to allow the organization to have an open culture of innovation and improvement that allows people to express themselves very freely.
Sorry.
But the example given about Post-it, the decision wasn't made by leaders, actually. It came from lower down, where they were trying to fix it, and then they pushed it up. So there are two things. One is to, we said challenge what is bad, tackle that, build on what is good. So, and explore that gap in between. So when something is bad, we have some organizations, I think we need to be open and frank about that some organizations don't allow challenge, don't allow innovation. So if you're in that kind of organization, you can only challenge as much as you are allowed to. I know people who have been moved and sacked and transferred and deployed because they were too innovative for that organization. Don't forget, I give an example that Steve Jobs, who was a co-founder of Apple, was asked to resign because his idea was too much for them. So because the people there couldn't see what he saw until he had gone to set up Pixel, and then they saw the opportunity and asked him to come back. So I'm not suggesting you leave your organization. I'm saying you push the boundaries slowly and wedge the door in a way that the organization allows you. You make your comments without compromising authority, and then you make your thoughts known. But there's a trick about how, when you're not in charge, your organization should allow you to speak. But there's a trick about how you make, we do this a lot with chairmen of boards and sometimes MDs, where how you make people think the idea is their own. So you have a boss who wants to be the boss, and you have an idea on how to improve something. So there are tricks. I mean, we can't do all that today, but there are tricks on how you make your comments known. We do it in a day-to-day basis, and you make him think he's the one saying it. So you sort of plant an idea into him and let him explore the idea, and then you build on. So by the time the idea, because people, human beings, still have this problem of fear. They want to be in authority, they want to be in control. So if you're suppressed, you can make them feel big, and you still make your voice known. And then they'll go around and say, yes, it was my idea, he's doing it. Who cares whose idea it was? But if it's when you go and present yourself that I'm coming with some new ideas, this place is not working well, that's when you face a challenge. Most organizations should be open enough to allow innovation, ideas, bank to roll, productivity. But yes, some organizations will restrict you. So I think that's important to note. I think the comment was actually not just for me, but both presentations.
Yes.
There was something that he said I wanted to say something about also. I like that comment around you must be better than yourself. That wasn't the way you said it, but I remember one of my quotes about the only way you can be better than somebody else is if you're better than yourself. Compare yourself with yourself and improve on a daily basis. Then you find yourself better than everybody else. So I like that comment. And go on, we have just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, Mr. Saji, I don't know if you'd like to also share your views on that question as well.
Thank you. I think Prof did justice to it. And the key thing that I always tell people is that your leadership potentials are within you, and they don't necessarily have to be a title in the organization. And how you manage your boss is a key example of the leader in you, because you just need to make sure that you don't outshine your boss.
Yeah.
You just need to make sure that you can provide sufficient support for your boss to be able to deliver the result that you want to see. So long as you don't care who gets the benefit, just make the suggestions to him or her, encourage him or her to take it to the right panel, and let him or her own it for all the best results that you get at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that addition. I know that we are way past time, so I'd like to ask a second question, and that came out, I saw that show up in Prof's conversation and in yours. It looks like we should look at our vision, right? We should constantly look at where we want to be while we're also carrying out our daily activities, like be on guard at the watchtower and also be at the battlefield. It looks like a lot of work, or it looks like something that is almost impossible. So how can organizations how can organizations and businesses play both roles simultaneously?
Let me just say a comment very quickly. I'll let Ms. Adeni give you the analysis of how that works. You're in a storm. The plane is in a storm and it wants to cruise. You need to navigate out of a storm and then cruise. Or there are many illustrations. You're looking down and you're looking up at the same time. You cannot lose the detail as a leader, but you cannot focus on the detail. You focus on the strategy and the future. You know where you are going. No one works. This is the way I would say it, and then I'll let him give you an example. No one works with their head turned down like this, looking on the pavement. If you've ever seen anyone walking on the road like that, then there's a problem. We look this way, but we don't miss what is down there. We look ahead as to where you're walking to, but you don't want to step on a stone. There must be a way, there are ways as leaders where you develop yourself to understand and to put your eyes and gaze on the future, but understand how the detail works and connects. So either through proxies or systems or methodologies or performance management tools, or whichever, I think Christopher, okay, thank you, Christopher. Either through different ways, you put on proxies in place to make sure you know how it's going on. Just like when you drive a car, you know what's wrong with your car, but you don't go underneath to check. But your eyes must always be in the future, in change, in innovation. So maybe you give an example. I'll leave it to you.
Thank you. Loretta, your question is on point, and what I always say is that you can't bite more than you can chew. The truth is that for any organization to become transformational, you must seek to continuously outdo yourself, to use the word of Prof. You have to continuously outdo yourself, and you can't outdo yourself in a small space. You have to go all out there, or you are not relevant. The world is so choked up now that only the survival is not just of the fittest. The survival is of the bravest. You have to be brave to stay in that space. Yeah. You might think it's so much to do, but the truth is you can't do otherwise. Or otherwise you won't be relevant. If I had just gone into that office, for instance, and I said, oh, $40 billion is good enough. $30 billion is good enough. These guys have been here for 40 years. Let it be business as usual. It will probably be still under $50 billion today. But I looked at it and I saw that as a challenge. And like Prof said at the beginning, what do you want to do differently? I set out to double that. I didn't achieve the doubling of it. It was 30 billion to 60 billion will have been the double, but I achieved 55 billion. So that's how you set yourself out. And you say, okay, even if you can't achieve your audacious goal of doubling that output or that outcome, you can at least get very, very close to it. Not taking that step is what puts you at a disadvantage.
Yeah. And I'll just say this: you must also understand that you can't remain. Survival is no more about remaining where you are. Survival is about growing and transforming. People need to understand that. People think you survive when you do nothing. You just coast. No, if you do nothing or you're not moving forward, you would after a while get eroded. So you can't just say, like I said earlier, you can't just be relying on tailwind and you think you'll survive. There will be storm. And when that storm comes, you wouldn't be there unless you're already transforming. And I like that S-curve. I think these slides will be sent around anyway. So some people need to go back and go in and study them in a bit more detail. And if people want a more detailed session on any of these areas, we could have a session just looking at that. Because I know there are some people who have made comments on specific comments who themselves have ideas they can share with us. So we could look at that at a different session.
All right, so we'll just take the last question for today, and that is from Mr. Ben Odo. He says it's for Prof. And okay, he says my question: how can individuals, organizations, or institutions stay or remain resilient in the face of fierce insurgents, violence, and turbulence? So how do companies or how do businesses or individuals stay resilient in
the turbulence is the need to be resilient, so obviously when you're resilient, it means you can bounce back quicker from shocks and from challenges. So if you're already squashed in the midst of the shocks, you need to obviously find a way to rebuild your strength, internal capacity. And some of the structure at the end that we saw around, look at your vision, look at your strategy, look at your priorities, your building blocks, and make sure that they're well aligned. And those are the ways to be resilient. I mean, I can only give an example. I've given an example for some of our Muslim brothers and sisters about how you know where Northeast and East is. Let me finish with an example that some Christians may remember, find relevant. It talks about a house on the rock and a house on the sand. And what that passage in the Bible was talking about is, if you dig deep enough, if you know where your foundation is, if you plan it well and you put it in the right place, then when that shocks come, you will survive. And I think it's about maybe we need to reset and relook at our strategy, and maybe some of it is not even aligned already, and we need to get back and get them in place. There will be security issues, and there is always, not just in Nigeria, it's everywhere in the world. There will be political issues. When you do your PESTO, you see all the issues. But when you do it and you anticipate them, you can build structures that would resist them better. That's the way I will end.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, sirs. Thank you for your contributions. We're super grateful. Thank you to everyone who participated, dropped questions in the chat box. I'm very, very grateful for your interaction. And I believe that we took down notes. So really, how do we move from corporate turnaround to transformation and growth? How do you do this? So first, I remember Prof said you should look out for the giants in your industry, the giants in your space. So who is that person that seems to be where you want to be now? Who is that person that seems to be, getting everybody's attention? Look at them. How are they doing that? And how can you begin to do the same thing or even better than they're doing? 2 is to understand your competencies as an organization. What is the gift that you have in your people, in your systems, in your organization? What do you have? Begin to look closely and deeply. And then the third thing is, I'll just take out Prof's quote when he said that as a leader, you should look at the details, but you shouldn't focus on the details. So you should put in systems and structures in place that can help you constantly check, that can beep and point that, oh, there's something wrong here, there's an issue here, we need to fix this. You need to also create a team where they are innovative, they can think without no box, constraining or holding them. It's very, very important that we have this, and we shouldn't be afraid to innovate. We shouldn't be afraid to try. We should rethink how we view failure. Failure is telling us that there are other ways to do this thing. Failure is telling us that it's showing us our strength, what we should focus on. So do not be afraid to fail, as an organization, as an individual, because most times all of these things you need to practice them as individuals. Organizations, like the word organisms, they are living things as well. So if you can practice these things internally, it's very easy for you to also, recreate them in your organization, in your businesses as well. So these are the take-home points. I believe that we'll go back to our businesses, we'll go back to our strategy team and begin to think about how we can try out these things. Carry out your PESTO scans, your SWOT analysis, and see ways that your business can increase. I can see the comment section. Thank you so much, Prof and Mr. Soji, for the wonderful session. I'm super excited to learn a lot. You made my day, God bless you. That's from Mr. Baki at Ajibola. Then Mr. Anthony says, wow, lots of takeaway points. Kudos to our facilitators and every participant. Thank you. Thank you for everyone who is sharing. Organizations should have a competency data. That's fantastic. Thank you, Maureen Curry, for sharing that. Thank you. Said awesome time. Thank you, Prof and Mr. Adeni. Bravo. So we're seeing fantastic comments in the comment section. Thank you very, very much. And this conversation would be going on a monthly basis as well. I would like to, at this point, invite you also for the next workshop or for the next roundtable as well, and to be focused on corporate governance and risk management. And here we'll be, using the 3 lines of defense in post-COVID environment. So the post-COVID, a lot of things are coming up, opportunities are pumping up here and there. So how can you as a leader begin to maximize these opportunities? And that will be the conversation that we'll be holding. The email will be sent to you. So please, we look forward to meeting you again next month to have another very insightful conversation. And I'm also happy to share, I know some of us had questions, that our organization, our consultants here are very happy to support your organization or your team in carrying out stress tests and carrying out scans and helping you to get stronger as an organization and maximize the challenges that come with all the disruptions that are happening around us. So at this point, I want to say thank you once again to everyone who has joined. Thank you, Prof from UK. Thank you for giving us that little bit of your time. We know that it's a very busy schedule. Thank you. Thank you also, Mr. Soji. I'm super grateful that you're here. And I think Mrs. Tinuke, also one of our consultants, is also here. She joined us. Thank you so much for joining and interacting. And thank you to everybody. So enjoy the rest of your Friday. The replay will be sent to your emails as well. So thank you very much. Do enjoy the rest of your Friday. Take care.